Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're into some source material that's pretty intense, really personal, but also, globally significant for a huge online community. We've gone through this 100-minute tribute to Marty DeGarmo. He's often called a visionary founder, maybe the guiding voice of ONPASSIVE. This was released after his passing. And our mission here isn't just to, note the sadness, it's to substance of what he did. Because the community reaction wasn't just standard corporate stuff. People said they lost more than a founder. They called him a warm heart, a relentless believer. That kind of language, it suggests he played roles far beyond what you'd expect from a typical executive, right?
Exactly. That emotional depth, it really jumps out when you look at the tribute. The initial action they documented, it talks about shock, hearts growing heavy. It reflects a community that saw him less like a boss signing checks and more like a genuine mentor, a friend even, which, immediately brings up a fascinating question for us. How does a leader, especially digital space, build that kind of deep personal connection across the whole globe?
Yeah, let's unpack that. We kind of to start with his persona, how he came across. Friendly face, wasn't he? In almost like the main content creator for the whole organization.
Yeah.
So what was it? What specific per se that turned him from just a founder into this figure of comfort, almost like family?
Well, I think a key part was just being consistently accessible. That combined with the very he chose. The tribute really highlights his humor, his patience, his sincerity. These weren't just like accidental personality quirks. They seem fundamental to making ONPASSIVE, which, let's face it, is a complex global tech ecosystem, feel manageable, personal even. He seemed to actively push against that corporate feel, making sure it felt more like a family, not just some abstract company.
Right, that phrase they use, the YouTuber who cared. It almost sounds like a contradiction for founder, doesn't it? But it seems core to who he was for them. This wasn't about slick corporate videos. It was regular, seemingly sincere digital interaction.
Absolutely. And it seems he aimed for genuine connection. Chasing views or fame. His broadcasts, they're described as consistently honest, full of encouragement, laughter too. Critically, it sounds like he became a voice for the founders, the early members, the affiliates, investors scattered everywhere, people who maybe couldn't always speak up for themselves, giving them that voice, powerful form of leadership.
Really interesting, though, this idea of digital friendship. The source material explicitly says many founders thought of him as their personal friend, even if they'd never actually met him face to face. How do you even achieve that level of intimacy just through a screen? And what does it mean for leading a huge organization built on that kind of emotional bedrock?
Well, it implies a huge investment in what you might call emotional labor. He wasn't just relaying updates, he was fulfilling a really vital psychological need for that community. He was the brother figure, the mentor, the one who apparently listened when people had doubts, boosted morale when things felt. When you're dealing with cutting-edge tech, new business models, there's always uncertainty. His role seems to have been providing that emotional anchor, prioritizing fairness, being transparent, keeping that community feel strong, even of just the raw technical numbers. Sometimes that makes sense. But that strong community feeling, it still needed some solid technical clarity behind it, right? Which kind of leads us into section 2, his professional role.
Because DeGarmo clearly wasn't just a figurehead. He had an active job.
Yeah.
What was he actually doing day to day, and who was he working closely with?
Yeah, his journey was tied up with ONPASSIVE right from the early stages. The tribute specifically calls out Mike Ellis and Dan Street as his brothers in arms. That language suggests a close-knit operational team, be less of a rigid corporate hierarchy, more collaborative. And his main function, you could maybe call it humanizing the machine. He was that crucial bridge.
Okay, a bridge. Bridging, exactly, because ONPASSIVE, we're talking a big AI-driven platform, lots of different tools, a complex affiliate side too. What kind of stuff was he simplifying?
Right, that's the key detail. He wasn't just being a cheerleader, he was translating the often abstract, maybe even intimidating concepts that come with the global AI-powered platform. Think about explaining how different AI tools fit together, or clarifying how commissions work across different products, or even the hurdles of global legal stuff. These are things that could easily overwhelm people without a tech background. He took that dense reality.
Anchored it back to human hope. They're about opportunity.
Exactly. Showed how the technology translated into real, everyday potential for the members.
So he's this essential translator. But his role seems deeply rooted in belief, too. The sources call him a relentless believer. How did that conviction show up in his professional work?
That conviction sounds like it was the anchor for everyone. He constantly reinforced the main vision, the CEO, Mufareh's vision. And the message seemed to be, this isn't about just selling dreams. It's not pie-in-the-sky speculation. He insisted they were building real opportunities on solid ground, solid tech. That's a really important distinction for any group or early buy-in community investment, isn't it?
Constant validation.
Yeah, showing the work was tangible, it was sustainable.
And that core philosophy, ordinary people deserved extraordinary opportunities. How did DeGarmo frame as delivering that promise?
He seemed to view the whole platform as a way to democratize success. His belief was, it means his spirit, his ethos, is literally linked to the platform's practical success. The tribute says his legacy lives on in every commission earned, every new product launched, every success story shared. So for the founders, achieving that financial success is, in a way, honoring Marty DeGarmo. That creates a very powerful loop, doesn't it? Emotional commitment driving operational continuity. He set the tone, and now that tone guides how the mission continues.
And the sheer scale of the morning really highlights how wide his influence spread. You mentioned it wasn't just one region, Kenya, India, the US, Europe. What does that global coming together in grief tell us about the network he helped foster?
Well, it shows just how vast distributed the ONPASSIVE community is. They're bound together not by geography, but by this shared digital experience and, well, by his common voice. These founders were grieving together across time zones, all connected by the same videos and chats he used to lead them. It paints a picture of incredible international reach, where a leader's voice can completely transcend borders. And even in that grief, it seems they didn't lose sight of what he consistently pushed for: happiness, simplicity, making heavy things feel lighter. Indeed, that legacy of warmth, it's noted as something that still comforts even in silence, is how they put it. It really reinforces that key lesson from his leadership style. Simplify the complex, inject humor, bring genuine empathy into the business structure itself. That approach is now almost like part of the operating manual for those carrying on.
Right. It brings us to the instructions. The call to action given to the community in that tribute. How do they move from mourning to actually doing something?
The clearest instruction is just continue the mission. Act. Fueled by belief instilled in them. And the assurance given is that quite literally live on, embedded in the digital platform itself. In every meeting replay, memory of the encouragement, it really comes together in that ultimate tribute. Death ends a life, but not yours. It sums it all up for the community, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When you pull it all together, Marty DeGarmo emerges as this unique blend. A business founder who simultaneously kept up his persona of a family and father and a really sincere champion for the adversity. His work essentially ensured that his core beliefs, his good works, are now structurally baked into the ongoing success and the emotional glue of the whole community he helped build.
That perspective really clarifies it. His impact was both deeply human, structurally vital. And that idea of an enduring presence raises a pretty big question for you, the listener, to think about. If his presence is now talked about as eternal, if his voice will...
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into some source material that's pretty intense, really personal, but also, well, globally significant for a huge online community. We've gone through this 100-minute tribute to Marty DeGarmo. He's often called a visionary founder, maybe the guiding voice of ONPASSIVE. This was released after his passing. And our mission here isn't just to, note the sadness. It's to really try and figure out the substance of what he did. Because the community reaction, it wasn't just standard corporate stuff. People said they lost more than a founder. They called him a warm heart, relentless believer. No, That kind of language, well, it suggests he played roles far beyond what you'd expect from a typical executive, right?
Exactly. That emotional depth, it really jumps out when you look at the tribute. The initial reaction they documented, it talks about shock, hearts growing heavy. It reflects a community that saw him less like a boss signing checks and more like a genuine mentor, a friend even. Which, immediately brings up a fascinating question for us. How, especially in a digital space, build that kind of deep personal connection across the whole globe?
Yeah, let's unpack that. We kind of just start with his persona, how he came across. He was that friendly face, wasn't he, in countless videos, almost like the main content creator for the whole organization. Yeah. So what was it? What specific things did he do or say that turned him from just a founder into a figure of comfort, almost like family?
Well, I think a key part is just consistently accessible. That combined with a very deliberate tone. The tribute really highlights his humor, his patience, sincerity. These weren't just like accidental personality quirks. These seem fundamental to ONPASSIVE, which, let's face it, is a complex global tech system feel manageable. Personally, he seemed to actively push against that corporate more like a family, just some abstract company.
Right. That phrase they use, the YouTuber who cared, it almost sounds like a contradiction for a founder, doesn't it? But it seems core to who he was for them. This wasn't about slick corporate videos. It was regular, seemingly sincere digital interaction.
Absolutely. And he aimed for genuine, not just, chasing views. Right? His vibe is consistently honest, full of encouragement, laughter too. And critically, it sounds like he became a voice for the founders, the early members, the affiliates, and investors scattered everywhere. People who maybe couldn't wake up for that representation. That's a really powerful form of leadership.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, though, this idea of digital friendship. The source material explicitly says many founders thought of him as their personal friend, even if they met him face to face. How do you even achieve that level of trust, that intimacy? And what does it mean for leading a huge organization built on that kind of emotional bedrock?
Well, it implies a huge investment in what you might call emotional labor. Healing updates. He was fulfilling a really vital psychological need for that community. He was the brother figure, the mentor, the one who apparently listened and boosted morale when it was tough or slow. And you have to remember, when you're dealing with cutting-edge tech new business, his role seems to have been providing that emotional angst parent, keeping that community feel strong, maybe even above just the raw technical numbers sometimes. That makes sense. But that strong community feeling, it still needed some solid technical clarity behind it, right?
DeGarmo just a figurehead. He had an active job.
Yeah.
What was he actually doing day to day, and who was he working closely with?
Yeah, his journey was tied up with ONPASSIVE right from the early stages. The tribute specifically calls out Mike Ellis and Dan Street as his brothers in arms. That language is a close-knit operational team, maybe less of a rigid corporate hierarchy, more collaborative. And his main function, you could maybe call it humanizing the machine. He was that crucial bridge.
Okay, a bridge. Bridging, exactly, because ONPASSIVE, we're talking a big AI-driven platform. It's different tools, a complex affiliate side too. What kind of stuff was he simplifying?
Right, that's the key detail. He wasn't just being a cheerleader, he was translating the often abstract, maybe even intimidating concepts that come with a global AI-powered platform. Think about explaining how different AI tools fit together, or clarifying how commissions work across different products, or even the hurdles of global legal stuff. These are things that could easily overwhelm people without a tech background. He took that dense reality
And connected it back to human hope, made it about opportunity.
exactly, showed how the technology translated into real, everyday potential for the members.
So he's this later. But his role seems deeply rooted in belief, too. The sources call him a relentless believer. How did that conviction show up in his professional work?
That conviction sounds like it was the anchor for everyone. He constantly reinforced the main vision, the CEO, Mufareh's vision. And the core message seemed to be, this isn't about just selling dreams, it's not speculation. He insisted they were building real opportunities on solid ground, solid tech. That's a really important distinction for any group buy-in or community investment, isn't it?
Constant validation.
Yeah, showing it was sustainable.
And that core philosophy, ordinary people, extraordinary opportunities. How did DeGarmo frame ONPASSIVE as delivering on that promise?
He seemed to view the whole platform as a way to democratize success. His belief was, it means his spirit, his ethos, is literally linked to the platform's practical success. The tribute says his new product launched, every success story. So for the founders, achieving that financial status, honoring Marty DeGarmo, that creates a very powerful loop, doesn't it? Emotional, operational continuity. He set the tone, and now that tone guides how the mission continues.
And the sheer scale of the meeting really highlights how wide his mention. It wasn't just one region, Kenya, India, the US, Europe. What does that global coming together and grief tell us about the network he helped foster?
Well, it shows just how vast and distributed the ONPASSIVE community is. They're bound together by geography, but by this shared digital and, well, this common voice. These founders were grieving together across time zones, all connected by the same videos and chats he used to lead them. It paints a picture of incredible international reach, where a leader's voice can completely transcend borders. And even in that grief, it seems they didn't lose happiness, simplicity, making heavy things feel lighter. Indeed, that legacy of warmth that's noted as something that persists, echoes of a familiar voice that still comforts even in silence, that's how they put it. It really reinforces that key lesson from his leadership. Simplify the complex, inject humor, bring genuine empathy into the business start itself. That approach is now almost like part of the operating manual for those carrying on.
Right, which brings us to the instructions. The call to action given to the community in that tribute. How do they move from mourning to actually doing something?
The clearest instruction is just continue the mission actively. What they can give him, according to the tribute, is to live that dream he talked about, financial freedom, happiness for millions. They're basically tasked with carrying that torch, fueled by the belief he instilled in them. And the assurance given is that his presence will quite literally live on, embedded in the digital platform itself. In every meeting replay, every YouTube video they watch again, every memory of his encouragement, it really comes together in that final powerful thought from the tribute. Death ends a life, but not. It sums it all up for the community, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When you pull it all together, Marty DeGarmo emerges as this unique blend, a business founder who simultaneously kept up this persona of a family man, husband, father, and a really sincere champion for the everyday person. His work essentially ensured that his core beliefs, his good works, are now structurally baked into the ongoing success and the emotional glue of the whole community he helped build.
That perspective really clarifies it. His impact was both deeply human and structurally vital. And that idea of an enduring presence raises a pretty big question for you, the listener, to think about. If his presence is now talked about as eternal, if his voice will live on in this huge digital network he helped build, what did it actually take? What does it take for a digital presence, just a voice, a face on a screen, to genuinely transcend a person's life and become a permanent, operational, and inspirational part of community's identity?
It's a powerful thought, especially about where leadership might be heading.
Something to mull over. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
To the life and, well, the legacy of Marty DeGarmo, a key figure, really a foundational voice within the whole ONPASSIVE community.
Yeah, and it's an emotional piece, isn't it? Even just starting.
Oh, absolutely. The feeling hits you right away. The tribute actually opens. It labels the initial reaction as the shock of loss. And it's crystal clear, isn't it? This wasn't just, losing a business partner or someone high up in the company.
No, not at all. The language they use.
Yeah.
It frames it as much deeper.
Exactly. It's described as losing a guiding voice, a warm heart, and someone who was just this relentless believer in Ash Mufareh's vision.
That core vision.
Yeah. So for you listening, if you're already kind of familiar with ONPASSIVE, you probably grasp how huge this ecosystem is. And you'll likely understand the vital role DeGarmo played. He was that human element.
The face.
Yes, the face. Always visible, always encouraging, providing that sort of stable reassurance. Especially, like you see a lot across digital platforms. YouTube comes up.
And that's where we need to maybe frame our analysis today.
Okay.
Because before we even get into the specifics of the tribute, we need to understand the context, right? We're talking about a huge global organization, a digitally native.
Thousands of people all over the world.
Exactly. And in that kind of, people are relying on, well, mostly asynchronization. They rarely meet face to face. So that public voice, that consistent presence of a founder, the person you see on your screen regularly, that voice becomes almost the embodiment of the organization's trustworthiness, its stability, its integrity. It carries a lot of weight.
A huge amount of weight. So this deep dive is really our attempt to kind of analyze how that unique form of digital leadership actually worked.
Precisely. So the mission here isn't just about remembering Marty DeGarmo, though that's obviously central. It's more about understanding the, let's say, sociological process he seemed to master. How did he manage to take these really high-level, abstract corporate goals,
Yeah.
the tech stuff.
Yeah, the complex AI ecosystem jargon.
Right, all that stuff.
Right.
And translate it into something that felt intensely personal, deeply accessible for literally thousands of people across different cultures, different continents.
He wasn't just broadcasting information.
He was building something else. He was effectively constructing this infrastructure of digital trust, sincerity, and analyzing that mechanism, how he did it. That's really key to understanding his legacy, I think.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So let's dig into that mechanism then. Focusing first on how he really shaped the public face, the understanding, the accessibility of ONPASSIVE. The source really paints him as this architect of accessibility.
That's a good way to put it.
The tribute maps out his journey, and it confirms he was involved right from the very beginning of ONPASSIVE.
Not a later addition.
No, not at all. Woven into the fabric from day one. But the source material is also quick to point out that the leadership wasn't just him, it was collaborative.
Right, they mentioned others.
Yeah, they talk about his brothers in arms, specifically naming Mike Ellis and Dan Street. So it highlights this collaborative approach.
And what's interesting there, looking at that structure, is you can almost see sort of division of communication labor, can't you?
How do you mean?
Well, while others might have been focusing on, say, the high-level strategy or the logistics or maybe more formal presentations, Marty seemed to have this very specific, specialized skill set. The source really emphasizes his role as the friendly face.
The approach.
Exactly, one who is exceptionally good at explaining difficult concepts in simple ways. And look, that's not just a nice-to-have skill. In an environment built around cutting-edge, complex tech, it's a strategic necessity.
Making the complex understandable.
Yeah, think about it. You're rolling out this massive AI ecosystem that involves all sorts of terms that could easily just, make the average person's eyes glaze over.
Back-end architecture, scalable data.
Yeah, right. API integrations, all that. Marty's role, as described, was taking that potentially cold technical reality and translating it into a warm, practical benefit for the user. He wasn't just giving updates. He was converting complexity into confidence.
Nails that function, I think, when it describes his role as bridging technology and human hope.
That's a powerful phrase.
Isn't it? It shows his output wasn't just informational, it was aspirational. He took the kind of nuts and bolts of building this platform and managed to infuse every update with this genuine excitement, this belief in the future potential. That's what helped founders grasp the why, not just the how.
And the really critical outcome of doing it that way, as the source points out, is how it shaped the whole culture of ONPASSIVE. They describe it using words like humor, patience, unwavering sincerity. That constant vibe made ONPASSIVE feel more a family rather than a game.
Oh, right. The family aspect.
And that distinction, sociologically speaking, is huge. Because when people's loyalty is rooted in that kind of relational connection, that affinity, they tend to be more patient with timelines, right? To trust information might be a bit ambiguous sometimes, and they feel a much deeper sense of belonging than if it was just, say, a purely contractual or transactional relationship.
That makes sense. Feeling of connection, that relational affinity. It seems like it was mostly built through his work as a content creator.
It seems that way, yes.
The source actually calls him the YouTuber who cared, which is quite a title, isn't it?
It really is. And telling.
It foregrounds his connection strategy over his corporate title. I mean, yes, he was a founder, obviously.
Or what resonated most.
And his motive was apparently very clear. He didn't seek fame. He sought connection.
Okay, and that's crucial if we're analyzing his content strategy.
If connection is the goal, then the methods you use are different. They say it's filled with laughter, encouragement, and honesty. That level, it immediately him apart from the usual polished corporate comms.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In this digital age where everyone's naturally a bit skeptical online, that kind of transparency, that honesty, that's the real currency. That's how to build trust.
He was consistent too.
Yes, he built that trust through consistency, through sheer frequency, showing up reliably. People had celebrating the wins, but also, and this is really important, own
And being real about the bumps in the road.
exactly. For this huge, just hanging on every digital update, that honesty about both progress and roadblocks. It trumps overly polished perfection every single time. That integrity really became his personal brand.
And he combined that integrity with this like unwavering, very practical core message. He kept reminding the community, the source says, that ONPASSIVE was not dreams, but about building real
Grounded.
Yeah, a grounded vision, infectious enthusiasm we talked about. It must have anchored people's expectations in, actual achievement, rather than just letting them drift onto hype.
And that integrity, it seems, it also extended to how he acted almost like an ambassador for the community members themselves.
What do you mean?
Well, the tribute says he left an indelible mark on digital spaces, not just through his own voice, but because he was actively giving voice to countless founders who couldn't always speak for themselves.
Ah, okay, so he was reflecting their concerns back.
Precisely. He was legitimizing their hope, their questions, maybe their anxiety sometimes, by bringing them out into the open publicly. That made him a genuine bridge, didn't it? Between the core leadership structure and this vast network of founders spread all over the place.
A conduit.
Yeah, conduit. And that built even more trust. So let's maybe politely and delve into the sheer power of that online presence. Because what's truly fascinating is the ability of this digital persona he created to generate such incredibly deep personal loyalty. And even, as the tribute suggests, feelings of genuine friendship across these huge distances. You see that reflected in the testimonies.
It is astonishing, isn't it? So many funders apparently felt a connection with Marty that, you normally think takes years of working side by side in person to develop.
Right. And the source really leans into this. It goes beyond just calling him a businessman or an executive.
Yeah, they use words like mentor, brother, friend.
Exactly. Which suggests his investment in the community wasn't just part of the job description. It felt or was perceived as highly personal. It implies sustained effort, not just, showing up for a webinar once a quarter.
And the way he communicated, it was described as fundamentally active, not just passive broadcasting.
Active listening almost.
Yes. The tribute uses these really strong verbs. It says he listened when others spoke, he encouraged when others doubted, and he lifted spirits when others were weary.
Wow.
It implies he was genuinely emotionally available to this massive global audience, constantly fighting against that digital isolation that can easily creep into dispersed teams.
And this whole support structure he built, this active engagement, it was visibly founded on a consistent set of values that he didn't just say, but demonstrated.
Right.
Fairness, transparency, and crucially, community. The tribute emphasizes these. And the point is, these weren't just abstract concepts written down somewhere. They felt like the actual rules of engagement for how he interacted online.
Okay, but this is where it gets maybe a bit complex, right?
How so? Well, we need to probably apply a layer of critical thinking here, don't we?
Yeah.
Especially about this blurring of lines between being a corporate leader and being a friend. That's a very important point.
I mean, the fact that, as source says, many founders considered him their personal friend, even if they had never met him in person, while it speaks volumes about the power of his presence, as they put it, it also points to a unique, maybe even intense sociological dynamic at play here.
Absolutely. You're highlighting a key tension. If leadership is built so heavily on friendship and this deep relational affinity, does that incredible emotional intelligence and constant visibility also create unique challenges down the line?
That's what I'm wondering.
I think it certainly can. I mean, the clear upside, the huge benefit is this unwavering trust that just leaps across continents. That's powerful.
Definitely.
But the potential downside in a model like this is that sometimes that deep loyalty, that feeling of friendship, it can potentially override necessary scrutiny or critical questioning.
Okay. It might be harder to question someone who's...
Psychologically, yes. If your leader feels like your brother or your close friend, it can be much harder to challenge strategic directions or raise concerns about governance, for instance. So while it fosters incredible solidarity, especially during growth phases, it can present real challenges when it comes to things like succession, which we should probably touch on later.
Right, because you need to replace not just the role, but the relationship.
Exactly. You need someone who can replicate not just the strategy, but somehow replicate that intimacy. And that's a tall order.
Let's stick with that thread of intimacy for a moment, because it connects directly to the emotional climate he fostered. Shifting focus slightly, the tribute spends a good amount of time just emphasizing the happiness Marty We cannot forget the happiness Marty. This wasn't just like a nice side effect of his leadership. It was almost an essential tool of his leadership.
A deliberate part of the culture.
Yeah. His gift is described as making complex stuff simple. We talked about that. But maybe even more importantly, making heavy days lighter.
The emotion you called it earlier.
Yeah. In the often stressful, volatile world of building something big, he somehow provided both clarity and stress relief at the same time.
And underestimate the role of humor in all this.
The laughter and jokes.
Exactly. They're described now as these echoes of a familiar voice that still comforts, even in silence. Humor, especially that reliable, maybe sometimes kind, it's actually a very efficient communication tool.
How so?
It breaks tension instantly. It reinforces that feeling of being in it together, that group identity. By using it consistently, he created this sort of psychological safety net for the community. When Marty laughed, maybe people felt they had permission to relax a bit, to trust the process, even when the path ahead looked complicated or uncertain.
Okay, so if we tie this all together, this deeply personal style, the focus on accessibility, the emotional connection, his legacy then seems fundamentally intertwined with the community's core beliefs, its driving ethos. So how did that foundational belief system that he championed really translate into the company's identity going forward and its future path?
Well, the source is actually remarkably clear about let's call it the architecture of his belief system. It dedicates a whole section to outlining these core tenets, which now seem to form the bedrock of his ongoing legacy. And they're quite specific, almost philosophical points.
Okay, like what?
First, this unwavering belief in Mufareh's big picture vision. That's foundational.
Right. Belief in the leader.
Second, a deep belief in the actual ONPASSIVE ecosystem itself, its structure, its technology, its potential.
Belief in the project.
But it's the third point, I think, is the crucial sociological driver.
Yeah.
Picking up on what you said earlier, it's the belief that ordinary people deserved extraordinary opportunities.
Yes. That democratization aspect.
Exactly. That belief completely reframes the whole venture, doesn't it? It stops it from being just another tech investment vehicle, maybe for the already well-off, and positions it as an engine for empowering the average person globally. That's the ethos that seems to have fueled and sustained this incredibly diverse grassroots network.
I agree. That third point really shifts the whole narrative. It's not just about building a successful company into space. It's framed as providing accessible pathways. It elevates the mission beyond just financial returns towards something more like genuine socioeconomic transformation for its members, for its founders.
And the source really drives this point home. It makes his spirit, his legacy, inseparable from the tangible, ongoing success of the community. His legacy isn't just a memory, it's explicitly linked to concrete outcomes.
Making it active, not passive.
Precisely. His spirit is shown to be manifested in every commission earned, every product launched, every success story whispered in gratitude. He's effectively been, well, almost canonized as the spiritual force behind the community's future material achievements. With his memory perpetually relevant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just something historical to look back on.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
powerful. And the strength of that shared belief, that shared connection to him, it becomes really visible when you look at the global reaction to his
The
loss.
scope of the mourning.
Yeah. The tribute paints this picture of this remarkable emotional connectivity spanning huge geographical distances.
It lists examples, doesn't it?
It does. It gives specific examples that illustrate the reach. From Kenya to India, from the United States to Europe. This makes it clear this wasn't just a localized, let's say, a corporate HQ. It was felt universally across this vast digital diaspora, which is really tangible proof of that global family structure he helped to build.
And the critical thing to analyze there, I think, is the shared experience of that grief. The source notes that founders everywhere bow their heads in respect, but crucially, they mourn, not in isolation, but together.
Using the network he helped build.
Exactly. The very digital connections that Marty spent years fostering became the mechanism through which they processed this collective loss. They used the strength body.
That's quite an image.
And out of that unified ritual, mentioned in the tribute, each founder lights a candle in their soul, honoring his voice.
Candle in their soul.
It's a profound metaphor, isn't it, for internal governance almost. It's a private act, internal, yet it's collectively acknowledged. It reinforces the idea that the community's collective heart, although broken by the loss, is still somehow beating in unison, guided by the moral compass he established.
Okay, so we have this family, yet globally dispersed, facing the loss of its most consistent, reassuring human voice. Which brings back to that critical question for the organization, the question of succession. How do they move forward, transition from that intense grief into action?
And the final part you seem to tackle exactly that. They focus very clearly on carrying the torch forward.
Right.
Identifying the greatest honor that can now is simply to continue the mission.
And that position from emotional paralysis, perhaps, to renewed organizational momentum. That's vital for the long-term survival of any venture so closely tied to its founder.
It's about channeling the emotion into purpose, precisely. It represents a very deliberate, strategic decision to essentially operationalize his memory. The community explicitly urged, the source says, to live the dream he spoke of. And there's this affirmation that in doing so, we keep him alive in spirit. So the memory of Marty DeGarmo was transformed from being just a static memorial into becoming a kinetic mandate for future action. He becomes the yardstick.
The measure for future decisions.
Yes, a moral yardstick for everything to do going forward. It's a classic example, really, of successful philosophical governance after a founder's departure. The lead behind an ideology, a belief system that's strong enough to serve as a continuing guide, a model for governance.
And the final farewell forces that endurance.
It does. It says, though the life ends, the legacy doesn't. His voice, his presence. They're described as being eternal, present in every future ONPASSIVE meeting, audible in every YouTube replay. He's become a reference point, the benchmark against which sincerity of all subsequent actions will likely be measured by the community itself.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener, especially if you're interested in digital communities, leadership, massive online ecosystems function? Well, taking this deep dive into one individual, Marty, managed to successfully blend a corporate structure, this big, complex AI company, with really deep, personal model.
A rare combination at that scale.
Truly. His impact wasn't really built on positional authority, was it? It was built on sincerity, on making complexity feel accessible, and on proactively nurturing this genuine global sense of family. His core identity, as the tribute celebrates it in those closing condolences, was so much more than just founder.
Right. The quote was,
More than a founder, you were a family man, a friend, a believer, and a dreamer. It was that whole rounded identity that seems to have made the loss so deeply felt and the legacy potentially so enduring.
And this whole case study, it really surfaces a vital question, doesn't it? For any organization, especially those built primarily on digital connection and that kind of personal assurance leadership, how does a globally dispersed, digitally native community actually handle leadership succession? How do they maintain that unified, emotionally resonant identity when the most reassuring human voice, the one that set the temperature, suddenly departs?
It's a huge challenge. How do you replicate that feeling?
You probably can't replicate the person. The analysis of this trip suggests the answer might lie in the collective response. So maybe the final provocative thought for you to listen to this consider how that collective shared commitment to carrying the torch of the shared loss. It turns it into this reinforced operational commitment to the original vision by making the collective effort itself the living manifestation of the founder's spirit. In a way, the community itself becomes the living monument, eternally echoing his voice, not just to roll videos, but through the continuous collective doing of what he believed in.